everybody, and welcome to the Cover 2 podcast, post-Thanksgiving edition. My name is Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we hope you had a great holiday weekend. We sure did. We ate plenty of food. We had plenty of fun. At least one of us did on Thursday. Jared was a little down because of his Dallas Cowboys.
Other than my Cowboys ruining Thanksgiving football.
But my Cardinals got killed this weekend too, so it was not the best football weekend, but we still had a great holiday, and we hope that everybody enjoys the holidays coming up in the future. But as far as this podcast goes, it's going to be football filled, like it should be. We're going to talk about the NFL. We're going to talk about kind of some of the division races in the NFC. A lot of big games this weekend. A lot of stuff to talk about, and then we'll jump later into college football, and we will actually predict our Final Four, because the conference championship games are happening this weekend. This will be the last weekend of college football, and we're going to predict the 4 teams that we believe will be playing for this year's college football playoff.
No real surprises.
No,
I don't think, at least for today. We'll have to find out this weekend if there's any upsets in the championship games, but I think this is one of those years where, I think the top teams have separated themselves a little bit from the rest of the pack, and
Definitely.
There's not that huge anticipation or surprise of, oh my gosh, this team is going to overlap this team, unless we see some upsets in the championship game, which is why they play the game. So you'll have to tune in next week to figure out if we had the right picks or not.
Yeah, we will definitely be debating. I think there's about 6 or 7 teams that really still have a chance in the college football playoffs, so there is stuff to talk about. But it's whether those 6 or 7 teams all legitimately have a chance. But let's jump back into the NFL. Obviously, everybody had a lot of time off, so you probably watched a lot more football than usual, and the NFL did a good job, whether they were lucky or not, setting up some huge games. We had, obviously, the Thanksgiving Day games, all of which ended up being good matchups and pretty solid games.
Debatable.
If you're a Buffalo fan, though, yes, you were very happy this weekend. And then you also had Patriots-Texans. You had Baltimore and San Francisco this weekend. And then Monday night, finishing off with a great Seahawks and Vikings game. So it ended up being a great week of football. And then now we go into not having football for 2 days, which should be...
My gosh, 2 whole days without football. What are we going to do?
No action this week.
Wow.
There's no action this week. Yeah, but so let's start off. The elephant in the room, Dallas Cowboys completely blowing it on Thursday Night Football on Thanksgiving against a team that they probably should have beat. The Cowboys are now 6-6. Jared, what is going on with this team? This team was supposed to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and now essentially they wouldn't even be making the playoffs if it weren't for the NFCs.
Right. Now, and I'm going to be talking as if the Eagles did not blow the game against the Dolphins, because that
Which is the way we should do it.
It softened the blow from the Cowboys losing to the Bills, and I went into this matchup on Thursday thinking, okay, the Bills at the time were 8-3. A very underrated team that not many people were talking about. They're obviously playing the AFC East with the New England Patriots, who have won the division for, I believe, the last 10 or 11 years, right? It hasn't even been fair. And so the Bills just constantly get overlooked. And I think that is what happened on Thursday when they traveled to Dallas, right? Dallas always plays on Thanksgiving. They know what it takes to play on that day. It's a short week. The Bills, I don't remember the last time they played on Thanksgiving, so they had to travel as well. Everything lined up in the Cowboys' favor. And the first drive, Cowboys came out and scored a touchdown, looked great. And it was like, oh my gosh, this team is fired up. They understand that it is kind of win now or go home in a sense, right? I feel like the playoffs have already started for some of these teams. The Cowboys, the Eagles, some of the other teams that are kind of fighting for a wild card spot. The playoffs have started now. Right, even though technically it's not for a month, you have to start winning games now. After that first drive, the entire momentum, whatever you want to call it, shifted to the Bills. And the Cowboys were not able to regain any of that for the rest of the game. They looked sloppy. I read a stat which was unbelievable, and it pissed me off even more. Ezekiel Elliott did not run the football after the third quarter with 9 minutes left. So basically, for over a quarter and a half, the Cowboys did not run the ball with Ezekiel Elliott, who is a $90 million running back who the Cowboys just extended in the offseason. Now the highest paid running back in the league. And yet the Cowboys were down by double digits. I understand that. But the fact that they just went completely one-dimensional and basically said, here you go, Dak. We're not going to run the ball. We're going to take that completely away. The Bills obviously knew what that was, and I think that is what helped the Bills and made them look so good as well. As they said, hey, the Cowboys aren't running the ball. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to. Ezekiel Elliott is a non-factor in this game. All we have to do is stop Dak Prescott, and we win. And that's exactly what they did. So, you can chalk it up to a lot of things. The Cowboys players did not play well. You can say that the coaching staff did not prepare their players well enough. They did not come up with a good enough scheme to beat the Bills. There are a multitude of angles that you can take on this. At the end of the day, I think this comes down to the players. Everyone wants Jason Garrett fired, and I'm not going to be surprised if and when Jason Garrett is fired at the end of the season. But this comes down to the players and their want, right? I'm not necessarily seeing them wanting it on the field. The Bills on Thursday looked like they wanted it more. Yeah. There was a 4th and 1 where Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, ran a sneak, right? He fumbled the ball at the snap. He picked the ball back up and literally fought and gritted his way to a first down. He got up and spiked the ball, and you just saw the emotion and the passion coming out of him. I didn't see that from any Cowboys players at all. Offensively, defensively, it didn't matter. It just doesn't look like this team is motivated, nor do they want to win when, even though they're at 6-6, sitting at 500, they're in first place. You know what I mean? It's like you control your own destiny, and it just doesn't seem like this team is motivated or they look like an actual playoff contender.
No, it's very strange for me. I thought they absolutely would win this game against Buffalo. I thought it would be kind of their turnaround moment. It would be their way of kind of saying, hey, we're making the playoffs. Yeah, we might be 9-7 because we lost some games earlier in the year. Yeah, we might be 10-6, but we're going to come into the playoffs with a vengeance. And the exact opposite happened, like you mentioned. Everything you said. I think they underestimated the Bills. I don't know why you do that because they're 9-3. I think they went in thinking that it's Thursday night, it's Thanksgiving night. This is our day. The Cowboys always play on this day. We're at home. This would be an easy win. But it ended up not being. And not only was it not an easy win, it was kind of a blowout. And when you look at the score, it doesn't look like a blowout. But they were down by 2 or 3 possessions by the end of that game. It's just not. It's not good at all. But like you mentioned before this, and this is why we're doing the podcast on Tuesday and not Friday, the Eagles blew it way worse than the Cowboys did. And so now the Cowboys essentially are just in the exact same position. It's like the Thanksgiving game didn't happen because the Eagles lost to the Miami Dolphins after having a 2-touchdown lead. So
this is like hot potato, right? This is hot potato for the division. Yeah. The Cowboys are like, no, we don't want it. The Eagles are like, no, we don't want it.
We really don't want it.
You know what I mean? I don't understand it right now. Both of these teams, in a sense, control their own destiny, even though the Cowboys have already beaten the Eagles once, and they do play in Week 16 in Philadelphia, which many people have said for weeks now that the winner of that game will win the NFC East, and I believe that is very true to this day, even though the Cowboys have a full 1-game lead on the Eagles. It's just like, the Eagles lose to the Dolphins. I mean, the Cowboys lose to the Jets earlier in the year. I mean, this entire NFL season, I'm really talking about the Cowboys and the Eagles, but we have seen some just ridiculous upsets that I don't think anyone in their right mind would ever have imagined, right? Yeah. The Dolphins going into the year looked like they were going to be 0-16. They have won a few games since then and are playing a little bit better, but the Eagles were clearly the better team, and they end up giving up 37 points to the Dolphins. Like I mentioned, the Cowboys lose to the Jets earlier in the year when the Jets were undefeated. It's just, like I said, it's hot potato. Neither of these teams want to win the division. Unfortunately, one of them is going to have to. Yeah. I said this last week. Neither of these teams deserve to make it to the playoffs, and they should just give a third wild card spot, to whoever team. Right now, it's Seattle and Minnesota. I'm blanking on a third team, but whoever that third wild card team is, they deserve to be in the playoffs more than the Cowboys and the Eagles right now. It's just, it's very sad. Yeah, it's weird. The NFL,
definitely needs to look at this kind of stuff because when you look at the NFL, it's supposed to be the top sport in America, right? It's supposed to be the thing that, literally everybody watches. And you're starting to see with this Cowboys-Eagles thing here in the NFC East, it's becoming a little bit of a joke. That there's all these really, really good NFC teams, and then there's the Cowboys and the Eagles who are going to make the playoffs, who are going to have a home game against one of these unbelievable teams, And that's just stupid. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right now, as of today,
Yeah.
right, December 3rd, 2019, if the playoffs started today, the Cowboys sitting at 500 at 6-6 would host the 10-2 San Francisco 49ers.
How dumb does that
Because the Seahawks won on Monday Night Football last night, they jumped the 49ers for first place in the NFC West. The 49ers are now the first wild card spot. So the 49ers having a fantastic year. If playoffs started today, would have to travel to Dallas against a 500 team. How ridiculous is that? I'm a Cowboys fan, and that is ridiculous.
I mean, good for the Cowboys because they're going to have a home game, but
unreal.
Come on, NFL. And here's the thing. I understand the whole division thing, although the division thing's weird because the Cowboys don't really play in their geographical area that they play in either, so it even makes less sense that the Cowboys would make the playoffs being from Texas in the East. That whole thing is weird, first of all. And then now that they're going to make the playoffs because of that, when they really should be playing New Orleans, right? New Orleans is the division and should be playing the NFC South, are going to make the playoffs because they play East Coast teams. It's very weird. It's very weird. But long story short, Cowboys still have a pretty difficult schedule. They play at the Bears. The Bears have been playing better lately. They play the Rams. The Rams looked way better against my Cardinals, although let's pump the brakes. Cardinals are terrible on defense, and I'm not going to give them any credit for that win. And then they had the big game against the Eagles, and then they play the Redskins at home to end the season. So, difficult schedule for them. The Eagles, on the other hand, had this golden opportunity. They would have played the Dolphins, Giants. Let me just make sure I got this right. They would have played the Dolphins, Giants, Redskins, Cowboys, and Giants to end the season. I mentioned this multiple times on Twitter to people saying that the Cowboys were just going to make the playoffs, all this stuff. I was like, no, wait, hold on. They lost the Dolphins, but they still play the Giants, Redskins, and Giants. And then the head-to-head match with the Cowboys. So the Eagles still have a chance at the division because they do have the easier schedule.
They have an easier schedule.
But they're a worse team.
After losing. Okay.
But
So we need to move on, but I just want to say this, and I think this is the most disappointing thing, and the thing that keeps, at least for me, because I'm a Cowboys fan, talent-wise, I'm not talking about coaching, I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking purely talent from both sides of the football. The Cowboys and the Eagles have talent all over the place. Now the Eagles have been hindered by injuries a little more than most teams this year. But as far as the Cowboys go, you look at their top to bottom roster, they've got Pro Bowlers and All-Stars at almost every level, right? So to me, it's about the fact that if this team was just mediocre and they maybe didn't have some of the superstars that they do have, it's more understandable why they're at 6-6. But the fact that they have all of this talent and yet they just somehow, week 13 of the season, this is when you should be rolling, right? They can't put it together. That to me is what is most frustrating, is the fact that they have all this talent in the world. You put some of this talent on another football team, and I guarantee you they're able to get more wins. So that's what it comes down to, these players at the end of the day. You can say Jason Garrett needs to be fired and the rest of this coaching staff, and I understand that, and I'm not against that. But these players are the ones on the field who at the end of the day have to execute, and right now they're not executing. So the onus to me, or the onus needs to go on these players. Figure it out and execute, and then at the end of the day, Jerry Jones can sit here and I think really evaluate this team, because just saying that Jason Garrett needs to be fired, that's kind of a scapegoat in my opinion. Some of these players need to be fired for the way that they've been playing.
Yeah, it is really weird because the Cowboys, Amari Cooper's been dealing with some injuries, and Zeke hasn't been the same for some reason this season. But to score essentially less than 10 points in both your last two games, I know the Cowboys got a late garbage time touchdown, but essentially against the Bills and the Patriots, they could not even muster up 10 points.
When they are the number one offense in the NFL.
What is going on? This is why the NFL is so fun to watch, because this stuff happens, and you bet the world on the Cowboys to beat the Bills, or maybe get the over, and they don't. And
was that you?
No,
Did you do that?
No,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I thought the Cowboys would destroy them.
I sensed a little bit of a little bitterness or a little extra in that.
On Twitter too, I took a little extra shots at the Cowboys because although I did win more bets than I ended up winning overall in the entire weekend of football.
Well, there we go.
At that point,
that's what we care about.
It was not good, and I lost the Bears game too. So I was like,
listen, let's move on, because I can't talk about my Cowboys anymore. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They do play on Thursday night, which they don't have a whole lot of time to sit here and think about their last few losses. They get an opportunity to redeem themselves.
Have 4 weeks of preparation.
Right, but they do play on Thursday, so it is, it's not a typical week where they get that 3 extra days off. They're kind of jumping right back into the mix, traveling to Chicago. So hopefully they can get a win, knowing now that their division rivals, the Eagles, just lost them in 5-7. So, but basically what we were trying to say is the NFC East is weak this year. Unfortunately, one of those 2 teams that we just mentioned will get into the playoffs. And as you all know, when you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. But we are actually going to transition into some teams that are actually playing well, really deserve
really good football team
to be talked about. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So we're going to kind of jump in. Obviously, the biggest game of this weekend was San Francisco versus Baltimore. AFC versus NFC, so the playoff implications are not as much as, say, the Seattle-Minnesota game on Monday. But this was still a very well-looked-at game. Very close. Walk-off field goal for the Ravens. Do you take away anything from this game as far as either team being better than the other, or was this just 2 teams and one team won?
I believe this was a great game. The fact that the 49ers defense was able to hold the Ravens to 20 points, I think is fantastic, and it came down to a late field goal by Justin Tucker just to get the Ravens to the win. Now, obviously, the conditions were not great. It was rainy. It was windy. They were playing in in a rainstorm in a sense. So both offenses were struggling, but you're going up. There were 2 great defenses. And, Lamar Jackson obviously did his thing. He's very slippery. He can throw. He can run. He is the full package. And I actually give a lot of credit to the 49ers for, like I said, holding the Ravens to 20 points when the Ravens, the last few weeks, have been scoring 40 points like it's no big deal without breaking a sweat. So, yes, the 49ers lost this game. You have to give credit to the Ravens for finishing the game off and doing what they were supposed to do. But I do not take anything away from the 49ers. This does not change my opinion about them. I still feel they are one of, if not the best teams in the NFC. And like I said, I feel bad for the 49ers because at 10-2, when they have been leading in their division the entire year, they are now sitting in a wild card spot at 10-2. It's
and they're going to have to play the Cowboys.
It's ridiculous right now. So I just, like I said, it doesn't take anything away from them. They're still a great football team. And their recipe for success is something that travels no matter what condition, no matter where they are. They play great defense, they run the ball, and they don't have to rely on their quarterback and Jimmy G to always have to make a play, right? All he has to do is control the ball and run the offense. And this team's recipe for success will, I think, carry them far into the playoffs.
Yeah. No, this team is very, very good. I did not think that this meant that the 49ers were posers or anything like that. Plenty of teams have lost to the Ravens this season. Certain teams have gotten blown out by the Ravens this season. So I think the fact that this was close and that they competed on the road, on the East Coast, 10 a.m. start for a West Coast team, very, very impressive showing, and I would not take this loss on the chin as much as other losses here. I think what this does say, in my opinion, is the Ravens are the best team in football. I'll say that. I think that this game was kind of to determine who the best team in football was, and I think the Ravens already went into it favorites, and I think after this, people are really like, especially after the Patriots played on Sunday night, people are saying, hey, this Ravens team is the team to beat in the NFL, to be honest. So it'll be really interesting to see what the Ravens can do in the AFC and the rest of this NFC West. But like we were talking about, Monday Night Football last night, Seahawks take over the division. Big win against Minnesota. I don't think a lot of teams expected Seattle to be 10-2 this season.
Russell, last name Wilson.
Yes, but also the fact that they have Jadeveon Clowney and they added a lot of these guys. It is working. It is completely working. The defense is back in some ways for Seattle. The offense is working well. I mean, they won that game 37-30, and Tyler Lockett had 0 fantasy points. And
wow.
Yeah, because I played him, and he was to determine
Nick
who
would
won
know.
the game, and he did nothing. And I was very, very happy that he did not do with Tyler Lockett. So I'm just saying, if you can score 37 points without using your number one receiver,
right,
that's pretty impressive. Fantasy-wise,
I'm actually going to sit here and say that I think DJ Metcalf is turning into Russell Wilson's favorite receiver. Now, maybe he's not the speedster or the downfield threat that Tyler Lockett is, but he's, I think, the more consistent, reliable guy. He's a big body guy, And when you on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, when you need a reliable pass catcher, I think that Russell Wilson is leaning more towards Metcalf as opposed to Tyler Lockett in some instances. So I feel like nothing against Tyler Lockett, but he's the deep threat guy. He's not the consistent player who's going to get you 6, 7, 8 catches a game. Yeah. I think that's where Metcalf comes into play a little bit more.
No, yeah, it's just that this team is starting. They have the two headed running backs in Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. We thought Chris Carson might have been hurt last night pretty severely, but he ended up coming back in the game, so they're all good there. They just they maybe need some of their other players to get a little more healthy, but
listen, at this point we're nitpicking. Yeah, right? Because
these teams are making the playoffs, so
they
it's not
are,
like
they are very good, and they deserve that right? When you are that good, when you are 10-2, when you are handling your business, doesn't matter who the opponent is, you can nitpick and say, oh well, this team, they're good, but they just need a little bit of this, right? This isn't the Cowboys and the Eagles who we just talked about, who we said there are a multitude of problems. So they control their own destiny, and like I said, unfortunately, one of these two teams is going to be in a wild card spot. Going to have an away game with their fantastic record.
No, and the 49ers schedule is a bit more difficult just because they play the Saints in New Orleans this week. The rest of the schedule is pretty similar, and then Week 17 will essentially determine who wins the NFC West, because that's when these two teams will play. So that's that, and these teams are making the playoffs. One team in this division that's not making the play, or that's struggling to make the playoffs, is the defending NFC champion Los Angeles Rams. So I want to jump in here and talk about them a little bit, because they're one of these teams like the Cowboys that a lot of people thought would be really, really good, and they're really, really struggling. 7-5, they get a big win against the Cardinals, literally and figuratively, because of the score on the scoreboard and because they really, really needed to win. This Rams team, Jared, plays the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football this weekend. They play your Cowboys at Dallas next week in the 125 game, and they play at 49ers on, I believe it's Thursday Night Football next week.
Good luck trying to make the playoffs with that schedule.
And then they play the Cardinals. So, with Minnesota losing last night, being 8-4, and the Rams being 7-5, this might be a ridiculous question, but do you think after that win against the Cardinals that they have a chance to still make the playoffs?
Do they have a chance? They do, mathematically. Do they have a realistic chance? I don't believe so. And I've actually said this going back to after, week 4, week 5 of the season. This Rams team just doesn't seem to have that that kind of, whatever that charisma factor that we saw that they had last year. Things were just clicking, and you can chalk it up to injuries again. Obviously, injuries are a big part of the game. They lost Clay Matthews for a month. They traded away, or Aqib Talib, their starting cornerback at the beginning of the year, got injured. They ended up trading him away. They traded away Marcus Peters. They give up the farm for Jalen Ramsey, and it's played out well so far. But I think there's new faces on this team. Listen, I think the expectations kind of skyrocketed. Right, this team last year was good. They weren't kind of sneaking up on anyone. But after going to the Super Bowl, you now have the expectation of getting back to the Super Bowl and nothing less, right? You give Jared Goff a huge extension, and that, I think, just puts more pressure on his shoulders. I think that he is underachieved as far as his contract goes this year. You can say that teams are scheming this Rams offense a little bit differently, or what the case may be, but this offense just has not clicked, like we thought it would. So for a multitude of reasons, and the fact that they're in a crazy good division with the 49ers and with the Seattle Seahawks, both sitting at 10-2. Here's the thing: the Rams can, go 3-1, 4-0, and get themselves in a better position to make the playoffs. But unfortunately, I think you would have to take the 49ers and the Seahawks to dip. They would both have to go 1-3.
Well, you don't think, because here's the thing: they're one game behind Minnesota now, technically, and they haven't played Minnesota this year, and they won't play Minnesota. So. Actually, maybe
so this is what's going on. The Rams are in a position to where they not only have to go above 500 these last 4 games, they need to go 3-1 or go undefeated. They also need help.
Well,
right?
yeah, and here's
that's
the thing.
The position that
Exactly.
they
And the only team they're really competing with is the Vikings ahead of them, because, like we mentioned, the other wildcard teams are 10-2, so they're not going to catch up to them. It's not going to happen. Minnesota, they played Lions, who are not a good team anymore. They've lost their quarterback.
Yeah, they're on their third.
They just lost Hawkinson, their tight end, so that's probably a win. Then they're at the Chargers, and the Chargers are literally finding new ways to lose every single game.
That's a win. I'll bet that's a win.
They play the Packers at home. That'll be difficult.
That'll be a great
game. The Packers have shown some weaknesses, and then they play the Bears. So definitely their schedule isn't as difficult, but they also have Kirk Cousins as their quarterback. So you never know. It's just interesting because the Rams, like you mentioned, here's one thing about the Rams that I wanted to talk about, because you look at the Cowboys, and these teams are somewhat similar in that a lot of people attack their quarterbacks, and Minnesota as well. But Dak and Jared Goff have both gotten further in the playoffs than Cousins has, so it is a little more traction on that.
True.
But when you look at the Cowboys, and they're 6-6, and they have the number one offense in the league, that's not what the Rams have at 7-5. Jared Goff did not throw a touchdown pass in November. What do the Rams do with Jared Goff? Because there's a lot of people that say they should trade him or all this stuff, but they're locked on to $30+ million a year. You can't trade those type of guys. So what do the Rams do? Do they need to just try to surround Jared Goff with more talent? Because clearly Jared Goff is not a Super Bowl quarterback right now. Although they got to the Super Bowl last year, he's now being exposed. So what do the Rams do with this guy?
Here's the thing. The Rams have been down in certain games this year, right? Down double digits. They're not there. This Rams team is built to play with the lead. When they play with the lead, they can run the ball with Todd Gurley. They can run their motion. They can lean on their defense, right? And they can control the clock. When they're playing from behind, they have to lean more on Jared Goff to throw the ball. They can't sit there, with Jared Goff under center and run Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks on sweeps and misdirections and try to kind of, out-scheme the defense. They have to sit in shotgun and say, Jared Goff, we need you to be Aaron Rodgers. We need you to be Tom Brady. We need you to throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game. That is not what Jared Goff does well, and I think this year, because of the way some of their games have gone, they've had to rely more on Jared Goff. Now, you can say, well, that's just an evolution because they're paying him $30 million a year and he just needs to become that player, but I don't think he's there yet, right? Last year, I think Sean McVay and the coaching staff did a lot better job of protecting Jared Goff and making him look good and not putting him in bad situations. This year, I think they've kind of loosened the reins a little bit and given him a little more leeway, and I don't think it's necessarily worked, right? I don't believe that Jared Goff is a $30 million quarterback a year to begin with, but in today's NFL, that's what the market price is for a quarterback. So you don't have Jared Goff. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, just trade Jared Goff or don't extend him and let him go when his contract's up. That's great. Well, who are you going to replace him with? And I think you can say that about a lot of things.
Exactly, yeah.
You can talk about that with the Cowboys and their head coach, Jason Garrett. Everyone wants him fired. Who are you going to replace him with? It's not just about, letting that person go, because you still have to fill that void and that vacancy. So for the Rams, I think it's about kind of going back to their old ways of last year. First of all, they have to start playing with the lead. They need to come out and start games faster. And they need to protect Jared Goff, right? Don't put him in so many shotgun situations. Jared Goff needs to throw the ball less than 35 times a game. When Jared Goff throws the ball more than 35 times a game, that is a recipe for disaster, and then the Rams will not win games, period.
No, and but the Rams, it's not only this year, next couple years, because they have over $45 million a year going to Jared Goff, whose touchdown interception ratio is 13-12.
By the way, that's not good.
Yeah, not good at all. And to Todd Gurley, who has 642 yards in the year. So, all right, that is, and they don't have first round draft picks for the next 2 years.
Oh, that's right. They gave that up for Jalen Ramsey,
yeah,
who they're going to have to pay next year.
Yeah. So now Jalen Ramsey will compete, and Jalen Ramsey will be better than these two for sure. Jalen Ramsey is a better football player than these two. I don't know what happened to Todd Gurley. Nobody does. He disappeared. He played good against the Cardinals, and so did everybody on the Rams.
Everyone plays good against
the Cardinals. I think he pumped up his touchdown and yards against the Cardinals, so maybe those stats don't even look as good.
You want to get your team a nice win, give them a good energy boost,
yeah,
build up the stats, play the Cardinals.
And then get killed by Seattle this week. Yeah. So, okay, real quick before we transition to college football. You look at the playoffs right now, the 6 teams in the NFC. Are these the 6 teams that will be in the playoffs
I believe so. I believe so.
I believe so too.
I don't think this changes. I'm still, I think you've got the Seattle Saints. You've got the Green Bay, and I think Dallas, just by way of I don't even know because the Eagles are choosing not to win games. They're choosing to lose against the Dolphins. I have a little more faith in the Cowboys because I think they're healthier at this time of the year. So I'll say that the Cowboys are the 4th seed in the NFC, and they will get a home game. And I feel that the 2 wild cards, as they are right now, the 49ers and the Vikings will stick as those 2 teams.
I would be extremely shocked if it wasn't these 6 teams, because that would mean the Cowboys would lose to the Eagles and all that. And that would mean the Rams would run the table against the Seahawks, Cowboys, and 49ers, which would make sense. I'll say this, though. There'll be a lot of debate from LA fans if the Rams beat the Cowboys and they end up being 2 games above Dallas to end the season. I'll just say that. That's going to be a debate that maybe the NFL should think about if there's a team that's 10-6 that doesn't make the playoffs, and there's a team that's 8-8 or 9-7 that does. It happens a lot, but this year seemed a little ridiculous with the Cowboys. All right, let's transition to college football, where there's a lot less controversy in college football as far as standings go. And there's a committee that chooses the top teams, not some weird formula based on geography. So college football playoff announcement will come this next Sunday. So we will know who's in the college football playoff game before our next podcast.
I mean, I feel like we kind of know right now.
Well, we kind of do, but there's definitely stuff that can happen, and we are going to kind of just discuss whether we do think this will happen. Let me just pull up these.
I mean, currently, right now, the top 4 teams: Ohio State number 1, LSU number 2, Clemson number 3, and Georgia sitting at that number 4.
Yeah, we don't really expect those to change tonight. If they do, it's just going to be Ohio State and LSU switching. But again, it doesn't really matter in the end. But those are the 4 teams, and none of them will be eliminated after this week. So, looking at the games, the teams that are kind of below that. Obviously, we have. It's going to be. Well, let me say this first. If all this won't matter if Georgia beats LSU, because we both think LSU's in no matter what. So if Georgia beats LSU, I think these are the 4 teams. Besides a huge upset by Wisconsin or whoever the hell Clemson's playing in the AFC Championship. Do you know? Virginia.
Yes.
Okay. So that's not happening. So unless there's some giant upset, we are going to have those 4 teams in if Georgia beats LSU. If LSU does beat Georgia, like a lot of people will expect, then will come the debate between Georgia, Utah, and the winner of the Oklahoma-Baylor game. Because as of right now, we don't know the full standings, but we do know that Oklahoma, Utah, and Baylor will likely be the 5, 6, and 7 teams. One big thing that will determine a lot is if Oklahoma is rated above Utah and they beat Baylor, I think they're in at that point. Because Oklahoma's schedule is more difficult than Baylor's. Although they have a worse loss in Kansas, I do think you have to look at who they played, and that's where you have to give it. So I think that's the only thing really here that will matter. Do you have any other different opinions about it? Does Utah just make it if they win?
No, they don't. They don't. And I think, unfortunately for them, it comes down to the Pac-12 just being awful this year. And I'm sorry to say it, right? We went into the year not having high expectations for the Pac-12, but they had just completely underachieved. There's really been 2 teams that we've talked about for the majority of the year, and that has been Utah and Oregon. Oregon loses their opening game of the year to Auburn, but it's the opening game, and I've said this multiple times on the show, and I'll say it again. The College Football Playoff Committee, they look at it's what have you done for me lately, right? So if you're going to lose a game, it's better to lose at the beginning of the year because you still have 9 or 10 games to make up for it and look better.
Yeah.
When you're losing later on in the season, you don't have as many games to make up for it and kind of change the committee's mind. They still have that bad taste, that bad loss in their mouth. So, unfortunately, I don't really have an argument with you right now. I know this is a debate podcast, and what we do best is debating and not agreeing with each other. But on this sense, and like I mentioned when we first started this topic, I don't really see any changes going on. I don't see any changes in the college football playoff or any 5, 6, or 7. I think what we see right now more than likely is what we're going to see on Sunday when the committee comes out with their final rankings.
Now, here's something that's interesting, and I want to get your take on this. And I've done this in the past. If you remember, I did this with USC when they were 9-3 because I thought that their losses compared to their wins and the fact they switched quarterbacks to Sam Darnold, that the committee should give them a chance. Cowboys, or not Cowboys.
Always thinking about my Cowboys. So it's okay. You can admit it. It's fine.
The Trojans ended up winning the Rose Bowl in spectacular fashion, and maybe there's a lot of people that said, yeah, they would have had a chance in the college football playoff, all that, yada yada. But here's one of those scenarios, and it's Baylor. And Baylor, their schedule is not difficult. Some of their non-conference games were Texas, San Antonio, Stephen F. Austin, but a big one against Duke in basketball. Shout out to them.
Totally different sport, but it's
and Rice. So Baylor still doesn't get it that you need to schedule a difficult schedule. I don't know what idiot is scheduling these games every single year for the Baylor Bears, but maybe you should be fired. But nonetheless, their one big game this year, they blew against Oklahoma. But they have another chance this Saturday to redeem themselves. So in my mind, if they're able to beat Oklahoma, essentially they're undefeated on the season in some way, shape, or form. So, Baylor not losing to any of their opponents, essentially, even though they lost to Oklahoma, beating them again a couple weeks later, I think, helps them. Compared to Utah, does Baylor go in instead of Utah if, in fact, Georgia does lose to LSU?
No.
You don't think so?
No. And I
Baylor
think,
fans have been screwed in the past.
I think your argument died the moment you said Baylor's schedule and how weak it is. And I'm not talking about their conference, like Utah is in the Pac-12. Their conference as a whole has been weak. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Baylor's schedule, like you said. Stephen F. Austin and all these other teams, Rice, no. Their schedule has been very weak. And yes, going up until that game when they played Oklahoma a few weeks back, Baylor was like the hottest team in college football. Everyone was talking about them. College Game Day was there. It was like everyone was trying their hardest to kind of elevate Baylor into the college football playoff.
And they were destroying
And and then they blew it.
It was so close.
Right? They completely blew it. So, no, I don't believe so. Because they did end up losing to Oklahoma, even if they do beat Oklahoma again in a rematch, I don't think that their schedule throughout the year is tough enough or legitimate enough to elevate them into. They can be in the conversation, but I don't see any way that the committee overall puts Baylor. I just
and here's the other interesting thing too, because their schedule does suck. I agree. Utah's schedule hasn't been the best either, and they will have played. I guess they would have played Oregon, so that's a better win. But Baylor only losing to Oklahoma is also way better than Utah losing to USC. So there's also that debate. I know the schedule sucks, but I don't know. There's just it's just always interesting to me when a team plays a team twice and has a chance to beat that team again, and you still don't put them in. It's like, I don't know. I'm kind of just doing the bit. Baylor fans have been screwed in the past.
You're on that Baylor
They're
bandwagon.
going to be very angry if Utah, who has a similar terrible schedule, ends up getting in with one loss and Baylor doesn't, when Baylor essentially didn't lose to any of the teams they played this season. I don't believe teams that go undefeated should be punished, but Baylor did not technically go undefeated, so I can't say that, but at least in my mind, I always have respect for teams that can beat a team. Again, although I do expect Oklahoma to win that game, regardless. So
This is you right now. This is you. I love Baylor, but in reality, they're not going to make it. I love Baylor, but in reality, they're not going to make it. You're just a roller coaster of emotion with Baylor. You love Baylor, but you know in your heart of hearts that they will not make it.
I know.
You're trying your hardest. Right? You're hoping that the committee is watching this video or watches this and gets some type of soft spot in their heart for Baylor to somehow put them in. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Baylor's a good team. They're not a great team. When you blow a 20-point lead at home to Oklahoma, It was like more than 20 points. It was absolutely ridiculous. That right there, I think it sealed their fate. It sealed their fate. Now, for the players, they get an opportunity to redeem themselves, and if they do come out and beat Oklahoma for in the rematch, then from a player standpoint, from a coach's standpoint, they get some type of redemption. But I don't think in any way, shape, or form that is enough to elevate them into the playoff.
Okay, so now what happens if Utah is ranked number 5 tonight, and Oklahoma's number 6? Utah beats Oregon. Oklahoma beats Baylor.
So
Baylor will be ranked higher than Oregon, but
so Utah's 5. In your scenario, Utah's 5, Oklahoma 6. Utah beats Oregon. Oklahoma beats
Baylor.
I think it stays the same.
So you think Utah's in?
Utah's the 5.
But okay, here's the thing.
They're not in. They're the 5.
No. But if Georgia loses, though, they're out.
Okay, if Georgia loses, then yes, then I would.
But that's the actual thing that's going to happen.
If Georgia loses,
if Georgia wins, then yes, obviously none of this matters at all.
If Georgia, yes. If Georgia loses,
I got to give you the scenarios. But so I disagree with you on that. I think when you look at Utah's schedule, their losses to USC, who's ranked. Okay, but we all know this USC.
They're ranked like 23rd, so let's.
The US team is good, but they're not great in any sense, and that loss still shouldn't have happened. But one loss, whatever, happened 4th game of season 2, so it helps. And their only win against a true ranked team would be against Oregon. They had a win against ASU, who was ranked at the time, but they're not ranked anymore. When you look at Oklahoma's schedule, they would have beaten Baylor. They would have beaten Oklahoma State, who was ranked, and they beat Texas when they were number 11. Now Texas is not as good anymore, but they still were number 11 at the time. And then they would have beaten Baylor again at number 9. That's, to me, I think Oklahoma's in if they win.
Okay,
that's at least my.
That's a legitimate argument.
Yeah.
Here's my thing.
I'm
not even talking about.
Yeah.
Think about this for a minute, right? Jalen Hurts transfers from Alabama to Oklahoma, leads that team all year long, and they somehow make it to the college football playoff, and Alabama doesn't. Well, Alabama's not, right? So I think we can all agree.
They're
Alabama's out. But if somehow Jalen Hurts and this Oklahoma team finds a way to get in, right? Jalen Hurts, that's got to be that's got to be like a little bit of redemption. Or, I don't know what you want to call it. Hey, come on, man. Come on. That would be ridiculous for Alabama to not even make it to the college football playoff, and Jalen Hurts, the former Alabama quarterback, to come in. That's somewhat of a redemption story.
Yeah, that's great.
That would be pretty big. See, I would root for that.
And Tua got hurt too. So
I hope Tua gets healthy.
No, but I'm just saying, Jalen Hurts is like, look, I'm healthy the whole year. You picked a guy that had a hurt ankle, that got hurt, all this stuff.
Hey,
that's
a
even
story.
More field the story.
That's a story.
I like that. So I hope Oklahoma wins now.
You know what?
Baylor fan.
Wow.
You're out.
Wow.
There's no way Jalen Hurts is not making this story happen. Stories happen in college.
Breaking news: Nick does not have any loyalty, no matter what he says. So for all you Baylor fans, and he was just buttering y'all up right there. He just let y'all down.
No, absolutely. Okay, real quick. The Heisman will happen. We'll kind of know who the Heisman will be after this weekend too. Who is your Heisman?
Oh, Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Do you think he already has it locked, regardless, even if they beat Georgia or if they lose to Georgia?
No, I don't.
So who would slip in that case?
There's. What was interesting? I saw a Heisman watch list as of last week, and there were 3 Ohio State players in there.
Who was that?
So Chase Young, Justin Fields, and you have J.K. Dobbins, their running back.
I don't think
I don't think so either. But the fact that you have 3, whether you want to call them semifinalists on one team,
I think that hurts them though.
You
all
think
those
so?
guys' chances because
it
hurts
hurts their chances, but just like how good is Ohio State? Holy crap! Right? No, I'll say that I think Joe Burrow has it locked up. And I think it's just the transformation that this LSU offense has taken. I mean, literally, up until this year, LSU has never been known as an offensive team. Like, good quarterbacks, like top quarterbacks in the country, go away from LSU because LSU has never been known to kind of develop and turn college quarterbacks into NFL quarterbacks. The last LSU quarterback that I can think of that went to the NFL was Jamarcus Russell, and we all know what happened there.
Well,
Right?
succeeded in the NFL. Because
Succeeded.
you have Zach Mettenberger, who I believe is already roster.
Yes. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, LSU this year went to the New Orleans Saints, poached one of their coordinators, offensive coordinators, who is now their offensive coordinator at LSU, and basically said, we're going to run the spread. We're going to completely change things up. We're going to shift the direction of the offense to a pro-friendly Joe Burrow, and we're going to see what happens. Obviously, it's worked out well, and I think the fact that they have just gone from a traditional style, boring offense that scores 13 to 16 points a game to an offense that's tops in the nation and scores over 40 points a game, you have to give credit not only to the coaching staff, but the guys who were on the field, and I think Joe Burrow deserves that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at their season statistics, and the only time they didn't score 40 points was against Auburn when they won 23-20.
And Auburn has a great defense.
Every other game, they scored 40 or more points.
Even against Alabama.
Against Alabama, against Florida, against Texas. I mean,
so I'm giving it to Joe Burrow right now.
No, I think Joe Burrow is the Heisman.
Like clear cut.
Unless he throws 6 interceptions against Georgia, then I think you could debate it. Like one of those things where a colossal failure happens, like Georgia kills them or something like that, which I think is next to impossible. But I think he's the Heisman. Like, I think Joe Burrow is the Heisman. He's earned it. He's the guy that everyone kind of knows in college football that usually, who ends up being the Heisman, because a lot of the writers are writing about those guys too, and they have votes. So I do think Joe Burrow is the Heisman right now.
This is just a fun, quick game. I know we got to wrap up very soon. If Joe Burrow were not in this Heisman talk, who would you pick? You better say who I'm thinking of.
I'm going to Chase Young.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Defensive player. The last defensive player to win the Heisman was Charles Woodson when he played for Michigan. He played cornerback. He played punt return, kick return. He did a little bit of receiver. He did everything. Since then, and that was in the mid-'90s, I believe, a defensive player has not won the Heisman. So Chase Young is a defensive, he's what you look for in the defensive end, right?
Chase Young is so good that you might hold off, if you're an NFL team, on picking the quarterback till next year. That's how good Chase Young is. If I'm the Arizona Cardinals last year, and I have Chase Young to pick instead of maybe Kyler Murray, I would want my team to pick Chase Young. I think Chase Young is even better than Nick Bosa. Like that. That's how good, But wow, and here's the other thing too. Interesting. Talk about Chase Young. Ohio State won 56-27 against Michigan. Chase Young had like a very minimal.
He didn't have a tackle in the first half.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
This team is good, man.
There's some dogs. There's some real players on Ohio State, and I think that's why most of the year I've been saying LSU is number one. The committee's kind of saying, hey, Ohio State. Obviously we all know they're great, but they deserve to be number one as well.
Yeah.
So I think you have 1A, 1B.
Well, and they probably will be number one because although LSU had a very impressive 50-7 win over a good Texas A&M team, Ohio State still beat Michigan, who is ranked and is always overrated. So whatever, Ohio State will.
You can make arguments for both teams.
Yeah, I did want to do this though, real quick before we end the podcast because it was kind of the whole point of the whole segment. Give me your final four. Who are your final four? When we're talking about it next week, predict who your final four are going to be.
Well, after that whole Oklahoma debate and Jalen Hurts and everything, I think I have to go. So I'm going to go Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3. Even though Clemson is for another debate. We haven't mentioned Clemson for a reason. They've been undefeated. Good for them.
They're undefeated.
Go look at their schedule. It's a cakewalk. But they're in because they're undefeated.
Like the cakest of cakewalks.
Yes. So Clemson number 3, and So I think Georgia's out because I think LSU will beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. So therefore, Georgia is bye-bye. And at the beginning of this podcast, I had Utah in, but I think you persuaded me enough.
See, that's why we do
to get Oklahoma in. Wow. This is one of the very first times that Nick has persuaded me to change my opinion on the show. Right? Usually I am dead solid. We come on the show and my picks are my picks. But Well, this is one of the first on the Cover 2 podcast.
There you go.
So I watched.
That's the first.
Oklahoma.
Here are my final four, and I think you might change another thing once you hear this. I'm going to put LSU as number one.
See,
I'm not mad about that.
I'm not mad about that.
They're going to be Georgia. So LSU's number one, Ohio State number two, Clemson number three, and I do agree with you. I think Oklahoma is going to sneak in. It will be very interesting tonight if Utah is ranked number 5. I'll tell you that right now, because then it creates this crazy debate.
Right, because then Oklahoma has to jump Utah.
And there's going to be a lot of, Jalen Hurts is on the team, it's Lincoln Riley, all that stuff, and why did you rank Utah ahead of them in the first place, all that stuff. It's going to be fun. Utah and Oregon play on Friday, so you get a little earlier stats, and then Utah, even if they win, it's like, well, now Oklahoma has to win. So Oklahoma actually will know, whether they even have to, whether it's going to be really nice. It's going to be
just watch.
I'm super
Nick
excited.
I'm super excited. Yeah, he can't even talk right now.
I can't
He's
excited.
so
Well,
excited.
because Cardinals are out, so I just have to look at these other sports to start to follow stuff. Because the Cardinals are terrible. And thank God I did not go to that game Sunday because I was locked into going. I was in the state of Arizona, and
gonna waste the money.
Yeah, my mom and I decided, we were like, maybe the Cardinals game won't be so worth it. Let's go home, enjoy ourselves, and we did.
Good call.
Absolutely. Real quick, I want to mention one thing too. If you follow any high school football, Mater Dei ended up not winning the national championship.
Wow.
St. John Bosco beat Mater Dei. They came back from over 20 points down at halftime, and you had this juggernaut team. If you don't know, St. John Bosco's quarterback is going to Clemson. I'm not going to say his name because it's really hard to say. It has a bunch of U's and G's in it. And Mater Dei's quarterback, Bryce Young, is likely going to be the potential starter at Alabama next year. So, this is what this matchup was. It wasn't just some high school football matchup. And St. John Bosco, who was led by the Clemson quarterback, ended up coming back and beating the Alabama quarterbacks.
Great to talk about the local sports around here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was my brother's team lost to Mater Dei the game before that. So, it was a little bittersweet to see Mater Dei lose. But just wanted to mention that because it was another big football game that contributed to this weekend. It happened on Friday. It was an amazing comeback, and it was really fun to see. They'll move on to the state playoffs against De La Salle, who seems like they're in it every single year from the north. All right, that's been the Cover 2 podcast. Lots of football we talked about today. His final four are for the college football playoff are going to be Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, and Oklahoma, and mine are the same teams. I just switched LSU and Ohio State there at the top. For Nick Nenad,
I'm Jared Smith.
this has been the Cover 2 podcast. See you guys next week.